Truth is stranger than fiction. Welcome to Scarymannequins. This series is dedicated to stories that are going to be sent in by you, the listeners. Stories that are true, terrifying, horrifying, sometimes just downright disturbing. A little background. Ever since I was a young kid, living up in the Northeast, I had a fascination with horror movies and things that go bump in the night. I loved to read Edgar Allan Poe stories. I loved to watch the horror movies of the day and learn about them, and, well, you get the idea. Now the story. When I was 10 years old, as I said, I lived up in the Northeast. And I lived in one of those typical brownstones, you know, the 6-story building, fire escapes. Looked dreary, the kind you see in those movies about the Northeast where people live and just try to survive day to day. The thing about those buildings is they had basements or storage facilities for the residents of the building. These were large, cavernous spaces that didn't have individual sub-stations for people to store, but rather it was a wide open area, very dimly lit. It wasn't long before we would go around to neighboring buildings and figure a way to sneak into these large basements. One particular day, I was alone. I had nobody with me. My friends were doing other things, which was not typical sometimes. It was during the fall, so it was getting a little bit cold, and the sun was going down around 4:30, 5 o'clock. This was a little bit earlier than that, and my mom had agreed to let me out because I couldn't stand to be cooped up in the house. So I went to a building that was maybe about 3 or 4 blocks down from where I lived, and there was a window. Now you have to understand, these basements, again, were at the bottom of the building, large, cavernous spaces. And they had windows that bordered on the edge of the sidewalk. And we learned early on, my friends and I, that you could kind of pry the window open and sneak in because the doors needed a key to get in from the area where you would enter. This one building, I was able to pry the window open and squeeze through the crack of the window, and I was inside. Now, I wasn't going to take anything. I never did do that. I just wanted to explore. This was a very creepy basement. I hadn't been in this one before. It was dark, and there was a light that, when you put it on, it didn't illuminate the whole area, but rather sections, and there were plenty of shadows. So I walked around looking and checking things out, and there were some bicycles and some other things, but I had this feeling. I had a feeling that I wasn't alone down there. I had this feeling that I was being watched. I was creeped out. The hair on the back of my neck stood, and I looked down towards the end of the basement, and I looked into a corner, and I could make the faint outline out of something that was standing there in the corner. It was a person. Now, at first I was alarmed. I was scared. And I kind of looked closer, and I could hear breathing. And it wasn't the kind of breathing that was normal. It wasn't the kind of even breathing that a person would give when they were just standing there or even sitting or even mildly jogging. It was a deliberate, almost panting. Well, I kind of got creeped out, and I made my way back, and I noticed that this figure was whispering something. I couldn't make out what it was saying. I didn't know if it was a man, a woman, God knows what. But I was 10 years old, so I was I was frightened. My natural instinct was to move back and make believe that I didn't see it. Now, being a 10-year-old kid and not wanting to admit even to myself that I was scared, I continued to look around. But I had this really sinking feeling in my heart. I looked over and now the figure had moved. It wasn't there. And I noticed in another spot with a very heavy shadow. There it was again. It was closer this time. Well, by that time I got very uneasy. I knew I shouldn't be down there. My parents would kick my fucking ass if they found out I broke into a basement. And what was worse, if I got caught by the janitor who usually paroled and watched over this basement, I would get in a lot of trouble. Well, maybe that was who that was, but I didn't think so. It was too scary, and it was creepy, and the breathing was heavier. By this time, I said, I've got to get out of here, so I made my way towards the window where I came in, and I tried to get up on a box, and of course the box fell, and I fell, and I turned around, and there was that figure. It was closer this time. The breathing was more pronounced, and it got a little bit louder, and I was scared shitless. I didn't know what to do. So I was trying to get up on the box. The box kept falling. By this time, I looked back again. I could hear the breathing heavier. This was fucking creepy. I had never experienced anything like this in my life. I didn't know what to do. Well, I managed to get myself up, pull myself up, and I barely got out of that space. I ran home as fast as I could. I never told anybody about this because I didn't know what to think myself. It was a few weeks later that news around the neighborhood that there was a woman that was found dead in one of the basements. Now, I wasn't sure if it was the basement that I was in, but that story has stuck with me since that day. I want to thank you for listening. That was the first story in a series of stories to come. If you want to send in a story, your own story, I invite you to do so. Please, in the description below, you'll see the information on where to send it. You can send it to scarymannequins@gmail.com.